You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Just to let everyone know, we do have a chat room. If you're listening live, log on to our chat room. Click the Chat Now icon on the home page there. It'll take you directly to the chat room. You can converse with other fans of Trevor and other movie geeks and have a great time in there. And also, if you have a question for Trevor, you can submit it through the chat room, or you can call into our show at 718-508-9477.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
I like when I can get through.
Yeah, and make sure you punch that question mark at the end of the number when you dial in. Okay, this is going to be great. Our guest tonight is one of our finest musicians and film composers. Early in his distinguished career, he co-founded the group Rabbit, which remains the most successful rock band ever to come out of South Africa. A solo career began soon after, followed by a meteoric rise as a mastermind behind the legendary and groundbreaking group Yes. Today, movie fans know him as one of our most versatile and distinctive film composers. His credits include an array of infectious and unforgettable scores for films like Armageddon, Con Air, Remember the Titans, Gone in 60 Seconds, National Treasure, and now, of course, Race to Witch Mountain and the upcoming 12 Rounds from director Rennie Harlin. It is a great pleasure to welcome to our show Mr. Trevor Rabin. Trevor, are you with us?
Hi, how you doing?
Hey Trevor, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
It's
Sorry
great to have you
about the other day.
Oh, no, that's perfect. We have you here now. We couldn't be more excited. You were on with, obviously, I'm Jamie, and you're on with my co-host Jerry as well.
Hi, Jerry. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So let's get right into this. You come from a very musical family, don't you?
Yeah, you know, my father was he was a lead violinist, the first chair of the Johannesburg Symphony Orchestra for more than a decade. My mother was a piano teacher, so it was kind of automatic for the siblings, for the kids to grow up, you know, learning piano from a very early age, and
right,
you know, very normal to walk into the house and there'd be classical music blaring out at all times.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If the music of that time in your life was primarily classical.
You know what? There was at all times classical music playing. But being a kid, and you know, I you know, that's what I heard at home, and it was you know, it was just automatically you know, kind of really bashed into my brain, and I loved it, but you know, it took a couple of years before I appreciated what it was. But certainly, I think having been around it and studying it and learning it from such an early age, you know, really helped my perspective. But you know, I would practice the piano for a competition or something, and my incentive for that was my dad would buy me a rock and roll record.
So that's good. That's awesome.
Yeah. What were some of those early records in the rock and roll genre that you took to?
You know, I'd go from listening to, you know, Verklachte Nacht with Schoenberg to, you know, listening to Cliff Richard and the Shadows, and Hank B. Marvin was really a favorite of mine, and that's really what started me playing guitar was him.
So was it always a given for you you knew at an early age that you were going to pursue a life in music?
Yeah, you know, it's really quite funny because, you know, my father, while being the violinist, was also a lawyer, and my brother was a fantastic violinist and also went on to become a lawyer. But for some reason, I don't know if I was too dumb or something, but it just wasn't on the cards for me to become a lawyer. And it was just very automatic that I'd be a musician from a pretty early age. I mean, at 17 years old, I was doing, you know, guitar session work all the time. So it was just somewhere that I couldn't have imagined doing anything else ever. Yeah.
And did you know that the rock genre was something that you wanted to pursue right away? I mean, was that a goal for you? Obviously, you're in the studio. You're working in the studio at an early age with certain groups.
Well, strangely enough, my father, who you would imagine would be saying, well, you know, by all means do the rock and roll, but have something to back up on. That's not what he said. I was really into. I wanted to be a conductor at one point, and I was really pursuing that. And I had a fantastic teacher, professor, who's now at British Columbia teaching the string department. Professor Walter Moniz, his name. He was just a great guy, and he was an amazing teacher. But while I was doing that, I was doing a lot of sessions, and my dad was quite impressed by how many people were booking me. So we had a long discussion, and he said, look, the kind of commitment you need to be a conductor, the repertoire you have to have at your fingertips if you're going to be a concert conductor is more work than I think you want to do.
Right.
So he kind of really kind of urged me to take what I've learned and utilize it in the more contemporary world.
Well, I have to tell you that we've never had a rock god on our show before.
Yeah.
So
one that I listen to all the time in the high school.
So we're thrilled to have you here, but it is a different kind of path, a musical path that you've gone through in your career.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering your rock influences and your whole experience with Rabbit and Yes and your great solo work. How do you think that prepared you for your film composition career?
Well, I certainly think my background and my home was just it really provided me with a vast kind of repertoire to be listening to at an early age, and just studying the stuff I think helps. But I think at the end of the day, it's your instinct and sensibility with regard to melody and theme that really is the important thing with film. But I certainly think, having gone through like 14 years with Yes and obviously prior to that with Rabbit and other various things and the sessions, definitely gave me a different angle. It's kind of different kind of curveball to come to the music thing with.
And there's a couple of correlations here that I find. First of all, with when you're in a rock group and when you're playing that genre, it's different from scoring, because with scoring you are doing it in the service of someone else's vision and hoping that your vision meshes with that person's vision. Is there a connection there between those two for you?
That's a great question, because on the one hand, if you're a solo artist, that's one thing. But when you're in a band, even though I was writing a large portion of the stuff while I was with Yes, there's still a collaborative kind of environment. And movies is the same thing. Although obviously at the end of the day, the decisions are made by the director. But when you're first presenting, it's what's your point of view on the scene. I'm lucky enough to be the first person to give the point of view, because I got to write it before we talk about it.
Right.
And then there'd be a I love that, that's great, or I hate it, write it again. But it's always a collaborative thing.
Yeah. I want to get into your process and how you work with the directors on all of these great films that you've collaborated on. We have a few callers on the line. You mind if we take some listener phone calls for you?
Sure.
Okay, this is a 212 area code. I think this is John. John, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, buddy. You're on with Trevor.
How you doing? Hi, Trevor.
Hey, what's up?
Hi, John.
How are you? Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you could offer any advice to composers who are interested in getting involved in film scoring. What path should they take?
Well, I think the most important thing to have is to have your own, is to really kind of, well, first of all, try and hone down your, get your skills together. But I think one of the more important things is to have an identity and your own style. I've met a lot of just fantastic composers who, it's almost not their fault, are faced with the dilemma, and it happens so often where the movie has a very set temp, and the temp score is set very clearly by the director, and doesn't really want it to deviate much from that. And very often the composer will have to really kind of try and match the temp, and it's one of the dangers of today. The temp has become such an important thing. It's a pity, but that's just the way it is. So I think the important thing is, if you can just try and develop your own identity, I think that's an important thing to kind of, to rise above.
Great.
Thank you,
Thanks
John.
for your advice.
How's the weather there?
The weather's a little cold, but it's always cold in New York at this time of year.
Yeah, we'll keep warm.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Thank you, John. Thanks for listening
calling.
too. What would you say that your identity is as a composer?
I think the fact that I didn't go through, and I'm not suggesting this in any way. I mean, I've been to the USC school, and I spoke there once some time ago, and the film scoring school there and the music school in general, Thornton School of Music there, is just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have the opportunity to go through that because I just went through such a different route. I certainly had no idea I was going to be a film composer. So I think that kind of led me to being a bit peculiar.
Yeah. And I know that you're incredibly versatile, and you've done quite a few different kinds of films, but some of the most obvious kind of credits in your resume are the collaborations with Jerry Bruckheimer in particular,
right.
and that kind of genre of action film. Is there a threat of being typecast as a composer, and are you always kind of trying to fight against that?
Yeah, that is a problem, and a lot of people, the first step is do something which gets you recognized, if that gets you working and recognized and some attention, that's a great thing. But thereafter, what invariably happens is people get asked for that same genre. Are we doing an action movie? Oh, let's call him, or let's call him. Those are the guys who do that.
Right.
And if you, I'll never forget when I was interested in doing the movie The Banger Sisters with Goldie Hawn, which was a light kind of real kind of female comedy. There was a kind of, wow, that's a real kind of, they really weren't that interested, and it took a while to convince them that I could do it.
Yeah.
So it took a bit of fighting on my agent's behalf and mine to get into the different genres. So I think it is important not to stay in the one place and just be comfortable there, because you'll get bored. You won't have the inspiration every time. So I really like, I've just done this movie, Race to Witch Mountain, which you spoke with the director, was fantastic.
He's wonderful.
He's he's great.
What a great guy, and so great to work with. And then I'm doing G-Force, which is an animation movie. So it's kind of a different genre. And then straight after that, I'm doing a film called The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is, I don't know if you remember the character coming from Fantasia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So so definitely my desire is to get into different genres and change as much as possible. It becomes more interesting, more challenging, and as much as Yes was an interesting band to be in, it was still you're in that one genre, and the thing I love about movies is the one score. For example, The Great Raid I did in London with an incredibly good orchestra, and Race to Witch Mountain. Similarly, did it with I think the orchestra here in LA is just the best film orchestra around. And then I'll go to another score like earlier on Homegrown, where it was I played dobro and a lot of acoustic guitar, and there's no orchestra. So the change and the diversifying is, I think, really is, and in answer to the last question, is also an important thing.
Yeah. Before we take the call from, I think, your biggest fan in the universe, I want to ask you about the process with working with a director. The communication that goes on between the two of you. You sit down. Do you start with a script, or do you like to start to see footage at the beginning?
I usually get, if there's an interest in me doing a movie, they'll call my agent, and my agent will call me and send me the script, and I'll read the script, and then the director and I'll talk, and then if we'll meet, and if he likes me and we get on, we'll take it to the next step, and at that point, once they're ready for me, we'll watch. Usually, it's a pretty rough cut by the time I start, and we'll go through it and very roughly just map out where music should go and where it shouldn't go, and often based on what the temp's doing. But then there'll be areas where I say, well, I think maybe the temp shouldn't be there. There should be nothing there. I think they'll be more powerful, and they can bring the temp in, bring the score in later. So we'll go through those kind of things. My music editor would take notes of that, and then bring out those notes. And at the same time as while that's going on, I'll be, just watching the movie, trying to come up with themes for the characters. And once I'm kind of happy with those, I usually do what I call an underture, which is like an overture, but for underscore, so underture. And I do a piece which is maybe 5-6 minutes long, which has all the themes that I think are needed, and how they work together, how they interact together musically and emotionally, and then variations on the themes, how those can work. And I'll present that, and if there's if the attitude is positive to that, then usually we have somewhere to start. And also it makes it easier because once you attach that to the picture for the director, he's kind of used to it, so he has more of a feel for what that means to the picture.
Right.
And then once that's done, if that piece is looked upon favorably, then I'll start scoring to picture.
You said something very interesting there, and it was going to be an offshoot of, excuse me, my last question. And I would think in those spotting sessions, when you're trying to point out sections of the film where a certain cue can arrive,
right.
It must be just as challenging to figure out where not to use music, and almost just as important in a way, because I think if people have complaints about film music at times, it's that it does too much of the work for you. Is that a danger?
Oh, so absolutely. I mean, one of the things music can do, which is very dangerous, is you can telegraph what's coming, and sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes it's really detrimental to the picture. So I think it's really important to know and to be able to feel and really think about that before you start writing. The other thing is what's happened in the last, 10, maybe even more years, is there's so much music, and it's become a trend. Directors really seem to want more music than there used to be in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
You listen to a Bernard Herrmann's score, who's my favorite film composer. Some of the score, and not even Bernard Herrmann, you listen to Psycho, I think the score was 30 minutes long.
Right.
And these days, I've done scores where it's, 108, 110 minutes long. It's almost the length of the picture.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but you also don't want to come across like you're lazy. It's, I don't think there should be music there, and you just don't want to do it.
Yeah. Speaking of Bernard Herrmann, last week you listened in. There was a big fan of yours that called in, and her favorite composer that she mentioned last week was Bernard Herrmann as well. And that's a great segue because she's on the phone.
I was going to say she was really knew her stuff.
Well, she's right here. Yeah. Julie, are you with us?
Hi, Jamie. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Trevor.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. And yourself?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, good. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you on Chris Squire's birthday. I think
that's
right.
I forgot.
That's an interesting little thing there.
it's funny because I spoke to him. He called me yesterday, and I didn't. Or was it today? Oh God, it was today.
Oh my goodness!
I didn't realize it was his baby. His baby, his birthday.
Well, that sounds like a soap opera.
So
I know.
Well, having said that, he's just had a kid, so he's.
Okay.
And he's very well, by the way. He just had an operation, and he's much better.
Right. Yeah, it's great to hear he's on the mend. And see, I knew about that, so I knew exactly why you said baby. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, and it's funny that some of your last comments actually kind of impinge on my question, but I'm going to go ahead with it anyway.
Okay.
In that Race to Witch Mountain, of course, is not the first family film you worked on, and that you have projects this year, but also previously Jack Frost, Whispers in Elephant's Tail, and Kangaroo Jack.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting that you have 2 family film projects this year. I know you took over for Harry Gregson Williams on G-Force.
Right.
And I wondered, it's always been my personal desire to have you make the move into animated features, score and songs, for example. And have you ever been considered for those type of projects in the past? You know, been on the short list for those types of projects. And so is The Sorcerer's Apprentice a full animated feature?
No, Sorcerer's Apprentice is actually not animated. But,
oh, okay.
But G-Force is kind of half animated and not. And,
right.
I don't know if you've seen the trailer.
Yeah, there's animation with the live action elements.
Right. So
right.
So that's really the first time I've got into that. There's been a couple of projects where I've really wanted to do it, but you know, like we were discussing earlier, because you get typecast into that thing, sometimes it's very hard. For people are going to say, well, that's what he does, and we're not taking a chance. We're not being his guinea pig. But on G-Force, I guess it's about guinea pigs. So.
That's true. Literally.
Exactly. Well, and yeah, I felt that maybe that was probably a stumbling block in terms of you making that move, because a lot of people do see you as the guy who writes great action scores.
Well, it's yeah, and it's and some of the movies like Great Raid, which it is an action movie, but there's so much of it is a kind of stirring music and dramatic music.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just going directly from one area to another. It's also going from one area kind of to another, so people can see that you're safe in certain places. I mean, it's a big move for someone to choose a composer, because it's you usually land up with the last 2 months and there's very little time, so they've got to be very comfortable that who they're choosing is someone they're going to be comfortable with.
Right, exactly. It's someone who they're comfortable collaborating with. So
Exactly.
Right. But so that's my personal plea to you: is please do an animated feature, because I think you would be so great for that.
I'm going to play this exact excerpt to my agent.
No, Richard, if you're listening, please get him an animated feature, please.
Julie, you are fantastic. You're obviously an uber fan of Trevor, and you should take over my job. You're very good at this.
Oh
no, Jamie.
It's a funny thing. The guy who runs my website, his name's Ron DeVivo, he called me and said, "Who was that girl on the show? I want to interview her for the website."
I just forwarded Julie that email, so they will be in correspondence. I'm sure.
This is working out for Julie really well. This is her big night.
Yeah, I should be Julie's agent. What are we talking about?
There you go. Apparently so. Well, and I really appreciate the comments you made to Jamie when you heard last week. So thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, guys. And all good things to you this year, Trevor. My regards to Shelley and Ryan. And thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
She's great. She's wonderful. I had a question about the actual CDs, the soundtracks. I'm always interested to get the composer's thoughts on this, because as a musician in Yes and your various solo work, I'm sure that you're concerned with album sales somewhat, but it's a different kind of perspective when you're dealing with the actual release of the soundtrack. How do you view those?
You know, it's a funny thing because it's not an area that sells mountains of records.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's not much that does that anymore. I mean, it's the old days of putting an album together, and so much of it was the sequencing of the album was an important part. How does that song go into the other? We can't find a place to put the song where it flows right, so we'll even take it off the album. I mean, that was an art in itself. Getting the album cover was a big part of it, and how the credits read, and how the font for the lyrics. And then we went to CDs, and the things got a little smaller, so it became slightly less of an issue. And now with the internet, by the iTunes, it's the cover's not an area which is terribly important, and then coupled with that, movie scores, because there's so little time to do it, and it's such a hectic rush the last 2 weeks.
Right.
I'm trying desperately to get the music ready for the dub, and at the same time getting a call from the studio saying, "Oh, you've got to get us a score album together," and I'm saying, "Well, I haven't finished the score yet." Yeah, but we need the album we have to have it delivered in 4 days so it can run concurrently with the movie, and so there's really usually very little time to get that together, and it's a real pity. I would really like to spend time sitting with the what are called stems, where you mix it down to a number of tracks, so that on the dub stage they have a certain amount of flexibility as far as if they feel that there's in a piece, for example, the percussion is getting in the way of the dialogue, they have the ability to be able to pull that down and push something else up. And I give it to them split up like that, although when they put it at what we call 0, it's the exact mix that I've mixed.
Yeah.
And, I would like to take those stems and maybe remix it, resequence it, maybe do a new track for the album, but there's just never the time. So
and
I'm
you're
always
working
a little frustrated with doing the albums.
And you're working nonstop. I mean, it's right to the next project. And I'm curious how a film or a project has to speak to you before you agree to take it on.
The script is usually when I get that feeling where, wow, this could be really good. And sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I won't mention which movies, but I've read a script where I really felt good about it, and then we make the movie, and it just doesn't get to do what the script did.
Right.
And then it works the other way, where the script's been okay, and then the movie's done, and it's turned out great. I mean, I remember reading Remember the Titans and thinking, this is a really nice script and it really works. But when I finished the movie, I thought it far exceeded my expectations.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. There was recently a poll, and I think internet users said that was their all-time favorite sports movie was Remember the Titans.
It's a great movie.
I didn't know that. Well, the funny thing is the Remember the Titans obviously led to other sports movies that I've done, but the weird one is it led to me doing the theme for the NBA, and through that I became a big basketball fan.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question about Remember the Titans, but while we're on this path here, does it matter if the film is less than what was originally desired? Does it affect the quality of your music?
Sorry, do you mean that it doesn't reach the expectations of everyone or me, or?
Is it important because your music is in the service of the films you're working on? If the film doesn't turn out as well as you had hoped, does that also translate to your music, the music you work on for the film?
You know, I don't think so, because I'm always trying to do as good a job as I can. So not consciously, but possibly if a movie's not good, you know, if the quality's somewhat lower, it might automatically just bring everything down. But usually, I mean, everyone's really trying to the best of their ability, and I'm. The funny thing is, as well, when I'm writing, I'm not really thinking. I think about what I'm writing once I've done it, and then I analyze it. I don't know where it comes from, and I'm always terrified from one project to the next, because I think, well, I'm happy with those themes I wrote on last week's movie. I can never do that again, and then I'm on another movie.
Yeah, I guess because I've seen films that weren't that great, and yet their scores were phenomenal and very memorable.
Right.
So I'm wondering, I guess the jux of my question here is, does a great film make you better? Is it more inspiring for you?
Absolutely, and I think great music can make a mediocre film better.
Yes.
That's very true.
Yeah. Let me take one more call, and then I want to ask you a quick question about Remember the Titans and some of your upcoming work.
Sure.
This is a 609 area code. I think this might be Mia.
That's me.
Oh, welcome.
Hey,
okay, cool.
Hi, Mia.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good,
Oh,
thanks.
it's so wonderful to talk to you.
Cool. Where are you?
I'm outside of Atlantic City.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in this little place called Tuckerton. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah, it's off the beaten path. So I do have a question for you, Trevor, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, I was wondering, now I know this is maybe going to sound a little confusing, what or who is your biggest influence in writing your music today?
I'd have to say for film, I would definitely have to say that the great classical composers, I mentioned earlier Schoenberg. Arnold Schoenberg's definitely one of my favorite. And then, the kind of usual, Beethoven and Tchaikovsky, and I love Elgar and Sibelius. So a lot of that. And as I said earlier, I love Bernard Herrmann's scores. I think he was tremendous.
Yeah.
And now, did any of the music that you listened to growing up in South Africa, did any of that influence your writing today?
When I did the film Whispers, an Elephant's Tale, I think sold 8, and they were all in my family. That was definitely influenced by, the traditional South African harmonic structure and the African music from South Africa. In fact, I went to South Africa to do an African choir there. But I think mostly in the usual Hollywood film, I don't think it's influenced it too much. My background in South Africa.
Well, am I allowed to ask one more question?
One more. It's your time in the spotlight, Mia.
Tonight is going to be the official our guester in the spotlight, our calling guester in the spotlight night.
Exactly.
There you go.
I was wondering if the music that you played, I heard the piece that you had done of Mussorgsky's, the music.
The pictures at an exhibition.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, was that any kind of influence? I mean, I know that piece was probably quite old, from probably the early 80s.
Well, that was written by Mussorgsky. It was a piano piece written by Mussorgsky, which was later orchestrated by Ravel, who's one of the great orchestrators of all time. And I just loved that piece, and I played it on the piano when I was younger, but I just loved it so much, so I decided to do a version of it on guitar. I do that sometimes. So, that one I put on an album, and it's there. But I've also, which I think it was released actually, I did Beethoven's Fifth Symphony with just guitars.
I didn't get that one, but I'm going to. I'm going to find that.
Well, it's on, you know what? I did it. there's a good friend of mine, Steve Morse, who's a wonderful guitar player, who's with the band Dixie Dregs, and I think he's with Deep Purple now.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a classical album, and it was Steve Morse and friends. So he invited me to do something, and I had just done that. So I said, well, you can take this. So it is on an album somewhere.
Mia?
Okay. Yes.
Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you so much for calling tonight.
Thank you very much,
you.
and thank you so much for answering my questions, Trevor.
Sure.
You're just wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank
Mia.
you. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
You got a lot of great fans out there, Trevor.
Yeah, you really do.
Now, talking about a high point in your career, it had to have been when they chose a piece from your score from Remember the Titans to play during Obama's acceptance speech when he won the election. I'm wondering, they had to have called you prior to that event to get your permission to use it.
So, right?
Yeah. Did they?
I was sitting in. I can't remember what I was doing, but I was watching. I was watching his speech, and I was just. I'd come in to watch the Denver convention, and next thing I actually got an email from a friend of mine, Joel McNeely, who's a fellow composer.
Yes.
Who said, I'm standing in Denver, whatever the Coliseum, whatever it was. Do you remember where it was? Some open air football stadium or something. He said, and Remember the Titans is blaring out the speakers like a Kiss concert. And I couldn't believe it. And I was watching, and I got kind of pins and needles, and I thought, what? I can't believe it. Because it's not like it was just incidental music. They really cranked it up for the fireworks and everything.
Yeah.
And no, they hadn't called me.
Well,
luckily, I like Obama. I mean, it would be really might have been a little rough if I was a neo-Nazi or something.
Yeah, no, it would definitely be rough, but it always helps, and it added so much to it.
It really did. It was a
transcendent.
It was a transcendent moment, and your music absolutely contributed to that.
Oh well, I was so proud, and it was such an honor to have that done, and then to have it played at the actual. They played it twice. It was his acceptance speech when he won. And then there was some talk about me going to Washington and performing it with a Marine band, and that didn't work out.
In terms of upcoming projects, I know that you've spoken of a couple of them, and you also have 12 Rounds. That's the new Rennie Harlin, correct?
Right. Yeah, I love working with Rennie. It's my third movie with him. He's just such a joy to work with.
Yeah. Is that a kind of a comfort zone when you frequently collaborate with a director like that? Is that a whole kind of comfortable language that you establish with that director?
Absolutely. And I think also it progresses as well, so it gets better. And you would think it should, and like a basketball team should get better as they play together. So I think it's a good thing, and it becomes kind of a shorthand and an understanding of where to go and where not to go.
Yeah.
So I think that's a positive thing.
Is there a genre? We've talked about animation. Julie mentioned animation. Is there a genre or type of film that you'd love to compose for that you haven't had the opportunity yet? A dream genre or dream project?
Yeah, I'd love to do a film like A Terms of Endearment.
Okay.
I'd really like to do something like that with an orchestral, but a light orchestral thing. It was very funny in the middle of Race to Witch Mountain. Trevor Horn, who's a friend of mine, the producer Trevor Horn.
Yes.
He popped into the studio to say hi, and we were doing this cue, and it was the end of Race to Witch Mountain, and big orchestral piece. And he said, I said, do you like it? He said, well, Hollywood doesn't get any bigger, sound-wise. I said, I didn't ask that. I said, is it good or not? He said, well, I didn't say it doesn't get any better. I said, bigger. So it's quite funny. The good thing about Race to Witch Mountain is it really goes through there's so many different changes. It was really a fun film to do.
Yeah, it does have different flavors in it. And listening to it today, it's a very captivating score.
Thank you very much. And I got to tell you, the orchestra were just so involved and just so great to work with. The guys, they're so good. You know, I mean, when you think about it, they see it for the first time and they play it through once, and then we do a take, and that's it.
Yeah.
It takes some pretty hefty musicianship to do that, because it's not easy stuff. I mean, there was some time signatures going from 9/8 to 11/8, back to 9 to 11, and they just play through it as if they're reading a nursery rhyme.
Some great musicians. You had I think a 78-piece orchestra on this project?
Wow.
Right, and a 40-piece choir.
Oh. Now, what goes into that decision? Because speaking with Julie, the authority on all of your work, she knows more about it than you do, I think.
I know.
She's your biographer.
Earlier this evening, you know, you utilize choir, such as with Race to Witch Mountain, and then you utilize single voices at times too.
Right.
What goes into that decision making, that decision process?
Well, there's two things. I mean, the one thing is, does it need voices, and if it does, obviously it's just an arrangement thing, and what kind of atmosphere you're looking for. And then, to be frank, the other areas, there's certain movies which just cannot afford a 80-piece stroke 80-piece orchestra and a choir at all. So sometimes, you know, you've got to try and make do with a 40-piece section and no choir at all. And then, you know, you can use synth choir, which these days is pretty good, but it can never be it's never the real thing until it's the real thing.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Trevor, we all are crazy about your work, and we love you. We love your work, and we really appreciate you taking your time to be with us tonight and discuss your process. It's fascinating.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.